Hi, I'm Miranda Arieh and I'm a singer-songwriter and a mental health campaigner.
Cut to the bottom and the troops were rising. Oh, get to the chase, I'm not giving up.
I've been running mental health campaigns for probably over 10 years now, but it was about 5 years ago that I started to think about merging that with my music, and I've been using my music since then to promote mental wellness and speak about mental health and use it as a platform for that.
Cool. Do you just want to talk a little bit about your personal experiences with mental health? Because obviously I've seen the video that you've done previously about what you've been through, which would be really good to share.
I've had like a long journey with my own mental health, and when I was about 14 years old, I was sectioned into Hyroids Hospital, the adolescent psychiatric unit there. And I was going through a really difficult time. Like, I'd been running away from home repeatedly, and I'd shortly after that been put into foster care, and it was about 2 weeks into foster care that I was put in the hospital, and I stayed in there for about 9 months, so it's quite a long time. And I felt really, it was quite an isolating time for me, but at the same time, that was the place where I first ever picked up a guitar. So I was handed like a 1-string guitar in there, like a little old classical guitar, and as soon as I was handed it, I just immediately started to write songs on it. So it was like, I'd always been really drawn to express myself through lyrics and writing poems, and I had like sheets and sheets full of lyrics that I'd like illustrated, and I'd always been very creative, but then being able to suddenly put that to music in that sort of dark place that I was in was just a really incredibly transformative time for me.
Yeah, so that links me on quite nicely to the next question, is what is your views on mental health in the music industry? Do you think there needs to be more support, or do you think the fact that there's enough support in the community already?
Well, I think that there are a lot of things changing for musicians. So Help Musicians UK have recently launched a 24/7 helpline specifically for people who are struggling with their mental health, who are musicians, which is absolutely incredible, and the information to that is on the Help Musicians UK website, and it's called Music Minds Matter, and they've been doing some wonderful campaigning surrounding just the sort of rise in mental health problems in musicians. And there's so many reasons, there are so many things that can be linked into that. So there's a lot of pressure, obviously, being in the public eye, and that's one of the things. But then also there's like late nights, being in venues that serve alcohol, and being in loud environments night after night. If you're touring, looking after your mental health can be difficult for some. I mean, for me, when I'm touring, I'm literally living my best life, and that kind of lifestyle feels like it really, really suits me. But for a lot of people, it might not feel worth it, and it can get into this sort of vicious cycle. So I think it's something that definitely needs to be spoken about more. It's way too common that we're hearing that musicians take their own lives. Like David Berman from Silver Jews literally last week committed suicide, and it's just an absolute tragedy, because he was just about to go on tour, and so many people were waiting to see him, and it just goes to show that actually doesn't matter. Do you know what I mean? And like that things going on in our head, it's way deeper than what's going on externally.
Yeah.
Yeah,
cool. If you could speak to a bit younger version of yourself, like maybe a 14-year-old, what would you say that you know about mental health now and personally your own mental health?
I'd encourage myself to try and start practicing being mindful more. And when I say being mindful, I don't mean like sitting in a quiet room and closing my eyes and breathing for minutes at a time. I mean just practicing being mindful in every single situation, because that's the real practice that you get, which is just, recognising feelings coming up all the time, especially like, because I suffer with chronic anxiety for so many years, and it's just like, it's like almost like a whirlwind in the body, just permanently these real feelings of a lot of suffering coming up all the time. Terror, panic, anxiety, fear, all these things coming up all the time, and being able to sort of watch that in myself and just recognise those feelings coming up and allow it.
Yeah.
Because that just is what it is, instead of trying to fight against, I don't want to feel like this kind of thing. Being able to allow it, that's been really, really helpful for me. So if I could have told my younger self that That would have been really useful. And also, definitely a tip I'd have given myself is like, stop giving a shit about what other people think. Because it's just something that's so destructive and damaging to so many people's lives, mine included. It's just like that fear of what other people think of you, worrying about other people's judgments. It's actually so irrelevant, but we just put it in higher importance than how we feel about ourselves, and it's just so destructive, you know. So yeah, they're the two things that I'd definitely tell me and myself.
Yeah. What are your protective factors when it comes to mental health? So obviously things that help you get through tricky times and help you get up in the morning.
Yeah, well, do you know, like, sometimes I sort of won't force myself anymore. You know, like, if I am having a really, really difficult time, I'll really listen to my body. And like I said before about, like, allowing everything that's coming up. You know, like, last year it was, like, November, so probably about 9 months ago, I went into a really, like, quite a dark, well, no, I'm not going to say dark place, because actually I was like having a bit of a breakdown. I'd been really massively busy, and I'd sort of got to and I'd been really heavily triggered, and I sort of like switched into sort of breakdown mode, which for me is like not being able to get out of bed, like literally not, you know, sometimes even almost dissociating, and it was, I was going through a lot of suffering at that time, but it was with complete acknowledgement that that's what I needed to do.
Yeah.
And it was very different than the other times that I've sort of got into that kind of state where it's just like, oh no, this is so awful. It was sort of like, I'm going to break down, and I'm really going to just allow myself to break down, because really seeing the power in allowing myself to go to that darkness, allowing myself to like witness my sort of like shadow self, you know, allowing myself to bond with that and to sort of like hold myself and work through things in that way. Letting myself fall apart, because sometimes that's the only way to rebuild. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And I think so much of the time we put focus on like, you know, putting on a brave face, you know, oh, I need to get myself out of bed. I've been in bed for all day and I need to do this and I shouldn't have, you know, and it's like actually my body's telling me that I'm like breaking down, and I want to cry, and I want to like, you know, sit with these feelings, and that's okay. Yeah. Sometimes we need to allow ourselves like a bit of a breakdown and a shakedown, and it's sort of shedding a layer of skin, and that's the way that I was visualising it when that was all going on, even though there was like so much fear stuff and old stories coming up in my head, it was nothing to do with the present day. It was all old stuff, and it was old feelings coming up. But by letting myself feel those things, I'm able to let go of them. Do you know what I mean? Like, if we don't allow ourselves to feel things, then we just push them back down, and they don't go anywhere, and they grow, and they just keep growing. So just let it come out. If something's coming to the surface, if you've been triggered, whether it's in a relationship or with a friendship or something that's happened on the bus, if you've been triggered, and everybody gets triggered, because we've all got these points that are sort of sore for us, that might not be for other people, but we've got personal triggers. When we're triggered, it's sort of that stuff's coming, we're being shown something to let go of. It's like, so something's rising in us to come up, we're being shown something that we need to let go of. So to work with that energy seems so much more productive than pushing it back down, putting on a brave face, carry on regardless, you know, be strong for the kids, be strong for, you know, it's like, no, allow yourself.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. Yeah. I think that's where we need to do more work, is letting people acknowledge what they're feeling, because I think a lot of people do just push it down, and that's when it does bottle up.
100%, yeah. And this is why we have so many cases where people commit suicide and everyone's like, I just can't believe it. Like, they just were always the life and soul of the party. They just were so happy. And it's like, they weren't. Do you know what I mean? But the damaging thing that was going on in their life is that that's what they were externally. They were being so strong. Allow yourself to feel. Because, like, human beings, we're bundles of energy, you know, and I'm not talking energy on some kind of like hippie level where, you know, but we're all just masses of energy, and we all feel it. We all feel different things rising in us all the time, and we meet people and we feel different energies. So to allow ourselves to go back to that rather than thought being like in here and feeling rather than being up here and like thinking. It's just, if we can sort of start retraining that and rebalancing how we're being in our bodies, it can be massively transformative, you know, for sure.
Definitely. So on the flip side, what do you think your risk factors are? So what are the things that make you a bit more vulnerable to your mental health tipping?
Certainly there's definitely triggers that I've really noticed in myself around abandonment and rejection, and that's been like an ongoing thing. You know, I was saying before about things that are shown to us. That's something that has been shown up a lot, and I know that it's because of like my childhood. And, you know, if you're brought up in that way, sort of being completely rejected by your parents and sort of taught that you weren't wanted, and like that. If your parents have done those things to you, or anywhere in life, it could be your first relationships or anything, we're going to be growing some kind of conditioning around us. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Those feelings, and then when that feeling happens in the present day, when there's an experience that might echo it, you know, in some way or trigger it, that old shit like comes back up. Yeah. It comes back up, and you need to like strip off that layer kind of thing, and you know. I'm getting a lot better at working through things like that, but it's just a big process of getting to know myself. It feels like I've really like over the past year or so, especially since that sort of like mini breakdown that I had, I've really been on a massive mission to just really get to know myself and sort of, you know, become very self-aware and become very aware of my triggers. And sort of when they come, go, okay, that's interesting, kind of thing. And not just make an identity out of it. Do you know, because like in the past, I've sort of, when something's come up, I've been like, I'm like this, it's my anxiety, and I make an identity out of this pain and suffering. And it's like, actually, no, that's not me, that's not my true self. It's like, that's conditioning. It's just old stuff coming up. And I can separate it from myself and sort of bring myself back to me, kind of thing. And sometimes the trigger's too strong. It's not always possible in the moment, but I think it's all about practice.
And I think it is very interesting because sometimes it comes up in ways that you wouldn't expect it to come up, and it shocks you in like the behaviours that it does like reveal itself in. Yeah. And it is just about picking that and getting to understand that a bit more. So
completely,
spot on with that. You have a section in your gig where you have a message about mental health and like being able to understand yourself more. When did that start, or has that been from the beginning?
That's been quite it's basically been over the last couple of years, 2 or 3 years. Probably I'd say about 3 years ago. It's something that I'd always wanted to do, and I'd released charity singles like for Mind, and I'd done a lot of work with Mind in the past, and I remember the first time I showed, because it's something I'd never really spoken about, like being in hospital, and it's sort of like still sometimes in certain situations I'm talking to people and I'm aware they know that, and I'm thinking, oh God, what are they thinking of me, like, you know, and stuff like this. And there's so much stigma there, you know, when it comes to mental health. But I remember first sharing my story, and I felt so vulnerable, and I felt so terrified and so scared. But something in me sort of wanted to do that, to express what a song was about at the time. I'd written a song called How Does It Feel, which I released, it was 2015. That was my first single that I released as a solo artist. So I've not actually been going that long in my solo project. And then it was then when I started thinking, oh God, I really want to serve in some way. I don't just want to write music. And I love that side of things. I love writing songs. I love just having fun with it. And I'll never sit down and think, I'm going to specifically write a song about this to do with mental health. But I'll write something, and then maybe sometimes even a couple of months down the line, I'll read it back and I'll be like, that's what I was going through. That's what this was about. Because a lot of the time when I'm writing, it's just completely free flow. But for me, it feels really, really important, and it feels like I want to marry the two things, because it used to feel very separate, like mental health stuff and music stuff, and it's like, no, actually what I feel like anything we do that we really love, you know, it's something that we really have a strong passion for doing, to sort of marry that up with how can I serve, that's going to be a lot more powerful. Do you know what I mean? So it's like actually, what can I do to help people? I want to use my music to help people. It does feel really important to me to keep speaking out about my own mental health journey, just in the hope that someone else might feel more okay to talk about theirs, kind of thing.
And it's so effective. Like literally, when I came to your gig, it literally felt like I got mentally like cleansed.
Oh, that's so lovely.
It was lovely.
Oh, it's what I was stacking the drinks with.
Just the last question: what things do you need to have in a balance to have like a healthy mental health? Do you think?
Certainly, a lot of self-compassion. That's something that I'm really passionate about. You know, we've all got an inner dialogue. Everyone's got it. Everyone's got a voice that's going around in their head. It's thoughts. It's speaking to ourselves in whichever way, you know. And I think that to sort of keep a really, really good balance, we need to always be sort of working on trying to ensure that voice is positive. You know what I mean? Working on our relationship with ourselves. I mean, for me, it's been just so powerful. And I remember the first time actually I used to do sessional work for Mind. I got sent to facilitate a self-compassion course, just sessionally, because someone had dropped out. I'd never done it before. I thought, okay, so I was reading through the facilitator notes and doing the training. And while I was like facilitating this group, so I wasn't even part of it, I was like, oh my God, I was like, this is so incredible. I was like, this is just such an amazing concept. You know, Leeds Mind have some amazing peer support courses that were very life-changing for me, actually. And there's an exercise where you have to like hold yourself and sort of like, and sort of, it's about self-comfort. I remember the first time I did that, I was like literally repulsed. I was just like, oh my God, it just felt so awful being kind to myself. It felt so alien, especially when I was like in this real pain state, to go, you know, it's all right, you know, like I would hug a friend or something. It was actually excruciating for me. And I was sort of battling, going, oh God, I hate myself. I literally hate myself so much, and it was so hard. But I just persisted. And now, sometimes I've got to a point where, coming from a place of quite extreme self-hate, actually, I used to struggle with like completely, really vivid, like compulsive thoughts about harming myself, and it's not something that I acted on as an adult. I did as a child, I did as a 14-year-old, obviously, that's why I ended up in hospital, but as an adult I sort of didn't act on this. But it's very intrusive thoughts going around my head, and it was like I was just living life completely with a lot of self-hatred. Now I've got to a point I can recognise that. I'm like, mate, you're doing really well. I'm able to speak to myself in a really nice way a lot of the time, which is just something I never thought I'd be able to do. I really would say that that's such a powerful tool in balancing mental health. You know, be nice to yourself.
Yeah, no.
You know, recognise if you're self-abusing in your head. You know.